Hey y'all, I'm Mayer Cunningham, the special education boss. If you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated at the 504 IEP table, you are in the right place. Every week, I'm breaking down the rules, the rights, and the realities of special education so you can walk into meetings informed, empowered, and ready to make real change. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, an advocate, a school-based member, or somebody who's just trying to do right by a student, this podcast gives you straight talk, real answers, and tools that you can use immediately. I'm not here to play politics. I'm not here to play sides. I'm here to train people who sit at the table and teach you how to follow the law, ask the right questions, and protect the rights of students. So go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change. We're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Hey, you guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And we're super excited about our special guest today, Diane Dragan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Nice. Thank you for coming. We are so excited to have her. I became a super fan of hers, I think about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. I love what she says and how she talks about special education. She's a licensed attorney in Missouri and Nebraska, and she helps families that have special education needs that need support from an attorney. So, Diana, I always say that nobody gets into this field accidentally. You didn't just check a box. So kind of share with us your background and how you came to be an attorney, but an attorney helping families with disabilities.
Sure. So I started as an attorney primarily doing criminal defense. So I came out of law school and worked in Las Vegas for a period of time as a criminal defense attorney, which I assure you, if you're going to do criminal defense, Las Vegas is a fun place to do it. And then I married my husband, Nick Dragan, and we had a couple of kids and did not want to raise them in Vegas, primarily because of the because of the education system. They were fighting for 50th place every year. So I got a job in Missouri at the Federal Public Defenders back in 2006. So I worked as a federal public defender from 2006. We had some more kids. And ultimately, my third was diagnosed with dyslexia. And so I started the journey, as I got to imagine many parents. You think you go in and you just tell the school, hey, here's something I found out about my kid. Can you help? And really the answer was no. We don't do that. We don't, your diagnosis means nothing. He's doing good enough, et cetera. So that started me on my journey to special education. First, we put him in a specialized dyslexia school for a couple of years. And, that hurt. If anybody's paid, the $40,000, $50,000 for special education, that was painful. But then we realized the next two kids had dyslexia too. So I brought him back and started litigating against my school district. And like many parents, I thought there would be an attorney to help me. There really are not attorneys doing this work. So I had to become the attorney that I needed. And after having done that for my own kids, I ultimately left my job as a federal public defender and am now representing families throughout the state of Missouri, primarily doing special education work. So that was a long round about how I got here, but like many, it was personal.
Yeah, let me ask you, we have 8.5 million children in America with an IEP. Where are the special ed attorneys? Like, I would like to grow them in a field. Like, we need them. Why do you think that there aren't more in this much needed space?
There's a couple of really good reasons. One is financial. So for IDEA cases, for due process cases, there's no damages. You cannot sue for damages in the Administrative Hearing Commission. So it's not lucrative. Okay. And fine if you were getting paid hour for hour. Obviously there's attorneys, family law attorneys, there's plenty of other attorneys that do hour for hour work. But for the most part, families can't afford the kind of work that one of these cases takes. So when I take a case to due process, I easily spend 200, 250 hours. Nobody's paying $400 an hour for that. And if you think about it, some of these families want a private placement that costs $40,000, or they want private tutoring that may cost $20,000. Why the heck Would they spend, $80,000 on an attorney to fight for something that may get them a $20,000 benefit, but they could just as easily lose?
Right.
So there's a financial disincentive for attorneys to do the work because we can't be afforded in it. The win rates are exceptionally low. I mean, there's some states where 0% of parents win. And the only way an attorney can get paid by the school district is if they're the prevailing party. So to take a case in a state or a district where the prevailing party rate is 15%, I can't do 80+% of my cases for free. So, there's disincentives. And then even within the law, even if I win, I can't get paid for time I spent in an IEP meeting. The parent can't get paid back for experts. And those things all cost money. An average case, you're going to need 2 or 3 experts. That's going to be 10 grand on top of the attorney's fees. So that's part of the reason is the financial, it doesn't make sense financially for a lot of attorneys to do it because we can't be afforded by the very clients who need us the most. And we can't take the risk that we're going to get paid back by school districts. So
Right.
does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Maybe we can just fix all that this next year. So, one of the things I love about all of your content is I love that you just say it like it is. You're not fluffing it and you're being really honest and transparent. As somebody that does that a little bit online, that can be very isolating. So what got you in the space of starting to have a social media presence talking about the work you do?
I mean, the very first thing I did was go to a school board, and literally the ignorance is bliss. Like I went there and I had like a little 3-minute speech prepared on dyslexia and what kids with dyslexia need. And I'm thinking if I just tell my school board, God love them, they're going to help. I mean, I started the same place every other parent did, thinking if you just ask the right questions and say the right things, you're going to get the help. So I went and spoke at a school board. And it so happened that another individual was recording the meeting and actually tape recording it because at that time they weren't like publicly available. And the parent was like, wow, I didn't know these things were going on. I didn't know it was a problem. Gave me a copy of the recording and actually helped me set up a Facebook page that at the time was called Lindbergh Leaders in Literacy. And we were not leaders in literacy. It was an aspirational title. And then I started recording speeches that everyone made. I would get other people to come in, etc. And the need and the desire for people to hear that others were speaking up was huge. I mean, that organically grew thousands of people based upon very basic content that, I'm doing in my house by myself for the most part.
Well, it's amazing. I love it. We talked before about people either adore me or are recoiled by me. I don't seem like there's any gray area. What do you think when you're talking about literally a regular statute, child find, developing an IEP, it's just as clean as it can be. What do you think the animus is when people come and respond on your post?
So anytime that I talk about, say, like child find is an easy one, like, hey, you're not identifying children. You get a bunch of pushback saying too many kids are being identified. All these kids, maybe if you read to them at home, it's a lot of blaming everybody but the school system. And this feeling that there's too much burden being placed on our school systems and they're underfunded, et cetera. And it's just a complete lack of understanding that I did read bedtime stories to my kid every day. I probably have more books in my house than the average school library. They were being read to in utero, et cetera. Reading to a child does not cure dyslexia. And it's that complete lack of understanding and finger pointing and blaming of parents that I think comes out the most in the comments. It's either blaming parents or defending teachers for not doing the work that needs to be done. Those are probably the biggest criticisms that I see. Are you seeing similar things when you're making posts?
Yeah. Yes. And so, yeah, well, I get that you've never been in a classroom and I don't have credentials, which both may be true, but, the blaming the parent, there's a man that I saw on YouTube recently. I think he has a book called It's the Child's Fault. And I just see this, it's bad parenting and it's that 8-year-old's fault. Like on Sunday, he was like, I cannot wait to see Miss Dragan and let her have it during science. And that's just, It's ridiculous. These are children, whether you like them or not, or have an opinion or not. These are children. They did not ask to have disabilities. And so, what I do know is when we help families and give them a literacy program, it's not going to just help your child. It's going to help lots of kiddos. Can you speak about that?
Well, I mean, one of the other pieces that got me into this is seeing the end result of the school to prison pipeline. So, we have these children that ironically the parents went to the same school and they didn't learn to read. And so it's generational problems in these schools. So to blame the parents for not, providing a better environment for their kids is ridiculous on a variety of levels. And we don't expect parents to be providing the algebra background before a kid goes into algebra. We don't expect them to go in and explain, scientific hypotheses and everything to a kid before they go to science. But for some reason, we expect parents to teach their kid to read before they go to school. And that's just not realistic. But to answer your question a little bit more systemically, when I push into a school district and I force them to follow the law for one kid, well, those teachers know what the law is now, and they know I'm going to come after it for the next kid if they don't do it. They tend to do better trainings. I mean, I've had people send me screenshots from schools where literally my name is on one of the PowerPoints, and it's essentially like, the Diane Dragan response. And so that's fine. Like, I can't defend every kid. So if what I do causes schools to do better training and, better compliance, that helps everybody, and even with my own kids, the fight, they got a Wilson trained instructor, which was the best that I could get for my school at the time. But that person drove to the school, taught my kid, turned around and left every day. And I went to the school board and said, hey, thanks. This is great, but why is she leaving? I'm not the only parent of a dyslexic kid in the district. And now in my district, there's multiple other people trained in the program. So advocating for one kid does make systemic change in some schools. It's not perfect, it's not fast, and it's not always what I would like, but it does make changes.
Funny that you said that about a professional development. I had, we always have people on the inside. I had a diagnostician text me, and she said they just played your video, and the director who doesn't like you turned around and go, "We better never see her here," which I feel like that's a compliment, right? So looking at reading, period. I know years ago, I think USA Today has written on a seventh grade level, our numbers are abysmal, general ed or special ed. Where did the reading intervention break down? Because these numbers have gotten worse and worse over time. Is it that we've changed the delivery of reading? What do you think the gap came from?
I mean, the gap is really in teacher training. At some point, the likes of Lucy Calkins and her, I mince no words, her crap curriculum, and her philosophy that you can love a kid to literacy. Like, we all of a sudden started teaching all of our teachers in universities and colleges about this idea of loving kids to literacy, having the just right book, making a lovely reading nook, having, lots of books of interest, and this belief that kids were going to learn to read by osmosis. And the idea that phonics is unpleasant, drill and kill. We're not going to, kids, if you do drill and kill, you're not going to teach them to read. But 40% plus of all kids need, you can call it drill and kill, you can call it whatever you want, but they need systematic, explicit instruction. And schools and universities are just not teaching that. And they stopped teaching it probably about 20 years ago when our lines started going flat. And now the teachers that did have the good training, most of them are retiring. So you have schools filled almost entirely with balanced literacy, Lucy Calkins, whole word, sight word, teaching styles that are just absolutely ineffective. And at the same time, they're cult-like. The people who followed Lucy Calkins, it's like a cult. But Lucy says, Lucy wants us to do it this way. And you're like, Lucy doesn't even know what phonics is, So it's really a teacher training issue at its core. And then the clinging to the bad practices on the belief that they actually do work. Right. I mean, that's kind of my big picture.
Yeah. When one of the things that I can't stand in IEP paperwork and I take out is this across the board oral admin. Or I'm like, well, he's 7. I didn't know that he was struggling in math. Well, we do it for everybody. And I'm like, well, that's not reading comprehension, that's listening comprehension. So do you see that a lot when you're doing your work?
I mean, I see a lot of just really poorly written goals. Okay. So there's I mean, one of the things that I was fighting literally this last week was a sight word goal. The kid can't read at all. And the first thing they want to do is sight words. And I'm like trying to be really nice. And they're saying, oh, we've done letters training here. And I was like, okay, well, if you look in your letters training book, then you will see sight words aren't introduced until multiple steps down the road. Like he needs to know all the letter sounds. He needs to know his vowel sounds. Let's work on CVC words. I go, we don't teach exceptions to the rules, which are sight words, before we've taught the rules. And they're like, but he needs to memorize these words so that he can have a chance to read. And I'm just like, I don't even know what you do with that. It's just so wrong. All I can keep doing is saying, no, that's not the goal we're going to write. And when I first started attending IEP meetings, probably 5-6 years ago, because I attended before I started my practice, nobody knew what an oral reading fluency norm was. And I'm like, that's literally the easiest thing to measure is how many correct words a minute can a kid read to see if they're on track. Is it a perfect metric? No. But if a kid's reading 3 words correct per minute in 5th grade, we know that we have a gigantic problem. And the reading specialist didn't even know that there were norms. So like that kind of stuff continues to shock me.
Yeah, that 90 years of oral reading fluency. Where'd you get this from? I don't know. It's like, well, that's not really important. I said, it is. She's 10. She reads 13 words correct per minute. That's a problem because the expectation is 138. She goes, well, I mean, it's progress. You just don't like it. And so, it's not that I don't like it. It's what these kids need to be successful in the workload, right? You talked about training. Can we talk a little bit about special ed training for staff members, period? Does that exist in Missouri? Because it doesn't exist in Texas. Is it like in a secret bunker somewhere, or is it not happening?
I mean, I think that special education teachers come out of college, as best as I can tell. Like, I don't have a degree in special education, but I've talked to a lot of teachers. They come out of college as generalists across a variety of areas, many of which are behavior management and classroom management. They get some basic skills in what is required in an IEP and how to take some data. They don't get specialized instruction in reading interventions. They don't get specialized instruction in writing. They don't get it in math. And they get kind of an overall, here's what autism looks like. Here's what Down syndrome looks like. They don't get the specialized instruction for the disabilities that they're working with. And then they're put at an extra level of disadvantage in that when they're teaching, whether it's reading, writing, or math, they get like all the second graders that have reading and writing and math issues, which may be very diverse in what they have, and they're put in the same classroom. And it's literally the same 30 minutes. They're teaching reading, writing, and math to different kids for their goals. So, they're not getting the kind of specialized training. Even with, you've got to encounter this too, the reading specialists. And I have a master's in reading. And I mean, there's one here that has a doctorate in literacy, and she doesn't know anything but balanced literacy. So, we're not training teachers in the actual skills that we need. We're making them generalists and hoping they can manage a classroom.
Right. When we talk about writing an IEP, and we have all these books and all the things about how to write an IEP and SMART goals. I think that we're teaching staff members to do software. I don't find that they know how to do an IEP, but they're often wanting, not you, but advocates to be credentialed and monitored. When I couldn't get somebody to write a procedural safeguard for $100, right? There's no special ed training requirement to staff members. Do you know why that is?
I mean, there's no like certification. Is that kind of what you're talking about? I mean,
just anything. They're like, where did you get that black book? I'm like, it's the law. Oh, like there's nothing. So we sit at tables going over a document that allegedly is important, but they literally have zero training in it.
Yeah, they don't get training in the law. I agree with that. And unfortunately, what happens, and I'm sure that I will get critics for this, the very school training in the law that schools get is by their hired school counsel that actually makes more money if the school violates the law.
Yeah.
So, you can pay a law firm, for a 3-hour training once a year and they'll make X amount. But if the school doesn't file the law, that same 200 hours that I put into a due process, the school district puts 200 hours in and they get paid for all of their hours. So they earn more money when the school violates the law. So maybe I'm a cynic, but how well are the lawyers training the schools when their primary source of income is the violations the schools make?
Right. I love that there's a publication company, I won't give them credit, but they have lots of books that talk about when schools have a misstep. No, this wasn't a misstep. You didn't allow the parent to participate. You drove the meeting. Do you encounter that when you get into meetings that there's somebody who's in charge and by golly, we're going to do it and follow this agenda?
I mean, every meeting that I go to, and I mean, I go to hundreds, has some sort of an agenda. And sometimes they'll be so bold as to be like, these are the meeting norms. We're all going to be nice to each other. We are all going to be respectful. No one is going to talk over anyone. We're going to assume good intent. Like that crap's in all the meetings. But there's still almost no one that knows the law appropriately. And even when the law is misstated, I mean, I was in one where the child was going to get some homebound services. In Missouri, there's a law that says 5 hours is the minimum amount you can give a child on homebound. And then the same law says at the bottom, like, this is unlikely to provide FAPE. Okay, like 5 hours over the course of a whole week. And so they're proposing 5 hours. And I'm asking, well, that's the minimum. I think this kid's going to need more. And the lady just goes, oh, no, you're mistaken. That's the maximum. In my 20 years, I've never given more than 5 hours. And again, I'm trying to be polite. I'm like, no, that's actually the minimum. And there's lawyers for the school sitting there who do nothing. And so then I have to file something afterwards. And, those same lawyers that sat in the meeting and didn't fix it there then get paid to litigate the fact that I was right and the kid deserves more than 5 hours. So even when you have lawyers in a meeting, they're not fixing the problems. Mm-mm. And sometimes even the special education lawyers the schools hire don't understand the nuances. I'm pretty confident that most of the lawyers appearing in my meetings before I started my firm had never sat in an IEP meeting or sat in very few IEP meetings. So it's a nuanced area of law and staff is not well trained in it. And they're given access likely to the same resource you're talking about that is all slanted towards how to get away with it, not how to comply with it, but what's the least amount you need to do to get away with, following the law.
Yeah, I had that. So you said that I had an attorney in one of my meetings, and I said, we need to put parent concerns for enhancing the education of the child right here. And she said, oh, that's not in the regs. I was like, well, it is 300. I have it like printed on my pillowcase. Well, that's your interpretation. No, it's a sentence, right? Even when you have attorneys and you're literally screen sharing, 34 ECFR, like this is, I had a principal tell me one time, she goes, Miss Cunningham, I know the law says that, but we don't agree with it. Oh, well, then that's completely fine. If you don't agree with it, you don't have to follow it, right? And so I feel like there needs to be some sort of enforcement mechanism for non-compliance of just delivering the IEP, right? And that is a failure of leadership to train their most important asset, which is teachers. Teachers want the training. Do you think that that's something that will ever be in play?
I mean, no one likes to hear this, but as you've said, I speak bluntly. The only way schools are going to start enforcing the law is when it becomes more expensive to not enforce it. Right. And that means litigation. And that means more people like me coming in and filing cases against them each time they violate the law. Because until it's more expensive to do it, to keep doing it the wrong way, what's the incentive? We would like to think the incentive is to help the kids, but I think we're probably jaded enough to know at this point in time, a lot of times the incentive is to minimize the workload, to maximize the number of kids we can get into a class, and to do minimal compliance. But, even things like state complaints, it costs the school some time to comply with that. but it doesn't cost them any money. It's not until you get an attorney involved that they may have to pay my fees. And now all of a sudden they're paying their attorney and they're paying the parent's attorney to not comply. And I think it's the same in most states, but I don't think parents can recover advocate fees pretty much in any state.
Nope.
So even when they bring in an advocate like you, they're having to pay it on their own dime. The school's not having to do it. So it's not a pleasant thing to say that until you involve attorneys and until it costs the schools more, they're not going to comply. Because I'm an attorney and it looks like I'm saying, hey, hire me. Really, I don't want to be hired. I have way too many cases as it is. I want schools to comply, but there's a lack of incentive if it doesn't cost them more.
Right. Talk to us about, I had a huge case here that we prevailed, and it literally said that the district would have to overhaul their entire VI department. That was the decision from the hearing officer. And you know what happened? Nothing happened. So when we get a due process decision, who is the person making sure that that's delivered?
I mean, those decisions you can try and enforce them in state court and say, here's what's going on. What I have seen, I've had a parent who reached out and she had a victory, but it was not being enforced. And she contacted like the DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And they're like, yeah, that's not really our job. And contacted the superintendent and they're like, yeah, we feel like this is good enough. And there really was no enforcement. And she went back to the attorney who helped her. And the attorney's like, man, I don't do that. So, and schools know that too. So you get this victory, but who's enforcing it? Unless you can get, the federal government, the department, the civil rights department or someone else to come in, it's up to you to figure out how to enforce it. It's like winning a victory in small claims court. How are you going to get the money from the person? It's the same kind of thing. Like, I have a piece of paper that says you owe me, but I have no way to get it from you. And I think that's what happens with some of these decisions.
So you talk about federal court. Do you do a lot with the Office of Civil Rights? Do you file federally for parents? Other than when you appeal cases, I'm sure you do that. But do you find that the OCR is a good venue to file as well?
So as an attorney, I don't generally use the Office of Civil Rights. I will refer parents there that don't want to hire an attorney and say, hey, here's an option. You can do that. As an attorney, I don't control that process. It's, you put in a piece of paper and you hope someone on the other end gets it and you hope they look at it and you hope they investigate it, but you don't have any control over it. So I generally do due process petitions where I'm litigating and then appealing those into federal courts. In Missouri, we have something called a Missouri Human Rights Complaint, which is essentially a discrimination complaint that you can file. And if you've got evidence of seclusions, restraints, et cetera, then you may be able to get into other types of claims. But as an attorney, I'm starting with a due process petition, exhausting there, and then moving into federal court, adding on 504 and ADA claims, et cetera. Because in part, I want to control the process. And I want to be able to access the discovery. I want to be able to do depositions. None of that happens if you file an Office of Civil Rights complaint. And nothing may happen currently if you file an Office of Civil Rights complaint.
Yeah, I have a mediated in 2 weeks an OCR complaint that I filed in 2021. I'm like, I don't even remember what happened last week, much less 2021. So tell us the good stuff that's happening in special education.
I do think that by speaking up, by people like you, people like me, other people speaking up, we're empowering teachers to speak up. I get teachers like on the sly, whispering in my ear stuff all the time saying thank you, because now the good ones, the helpers, are literally saying, one of the teachers that talked to me goes, well, I told my administrator, I am not going to be cross-examined by Diane Dragan. I'm doing it this way. And if that helps a teacher to stand up and say, this is how I'm going to do it. And I've spoken to a fair number of like speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and I remind them, you have a separate oath that you have to keep for your licensing as an SLP or an OT. Go tell your administrator to screw off. Like, you have to do it this way. You have to provide these minutes. You have to provide these services. So I do think that we are empowering the good teachers who want to do the work to speak up and to do the good work. And those that are kind of in the middle, don't want to sit on the cross-examination stand. They don't want to be the subject of the complaint. They don't want to read their name and things. So they are doing a little bit more. And I do think we're starting to get better trainings. I still feel that a lot of the trainings are kind of cover their ass trainings, just going to be honest. Like, it's like, you need to start doing these things. You need to write the SMART goals, or you need to write goals in other areas. But I am seeing a trend towards at least more understanding by the more people speaking up.
Right.
Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah. And when I'm in a meeting, I'm not just busting out something. I'm like, here's the statute. Here's 90 years. I mean, like, I feel like if we all know better, we could do better. On the teacher side, and I probably 80% of the people I train are teachers. What could be something that we could do for teachers to resource them outside of an IEP meeting? If you have a child with a disability, what would you direct that parent to do with its school?
To help the teachers to have more resources, or the parent?
When a parent's coming into a school, what could they do to partner initially with the school for their child with an IEP?
I mean, that's tough, because even like when I was a parent in this, I was sending like reading is rocket science article from Louisa Moats. I was sending stuff from the IDA. I was, sending stuff saying, hey, Fonteness and Pinnell programs don't work. And I was getting poo-pooed, and it was like, I mean, I still have an email from one of the administrators from when they sent my kid a packet. Have you seen those stupid bookmarks that are like Skippy Frog skips the hard words and Flippy Dolphin flips the vowel? It's all crap, Fonteness and Pinnell balanced literacy crap. And I sent the whole thing back and I said, this isn't appropriate. Like, you need to stop doing this. And the email I got back was, we are a balanced literacy district through and through, and this is what works. So I'm hesitant to tell parents to try and encourage teachers to do better, because they're just seen as the problem parent then. And, those things are ignored. But I do think that teachers, many of them, are seeking better. Like, teachers didn't get into this profession to fail kids, and they're failing a lot of them right now. So when they get better training, when they do like a letters program or something, they're like, oh, okay, that builds upon their desire to do better. And I think the same goes with the legal trainings. Like, once we explain, hey, the IDA was put in place for these things, and parents are actually part of the decision making. And, I think that helps. So making it accessible, making it low cost, and not making it particularly time consuming, because, letters training is a lot. It's like a college course. And we're asking teachers to do that outside of their regular job. So, I mean, those are some of the hurdles. Are you seeing things that are working to get teachers more involved?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my parents that you go back to school. I call it the Zach Pack, and it's a 3x5 picture of your kiddo and like a one sheet, right? Here's what he will work for. Here's what his struggles and his strengths, right? Here's my cell number because he's not scared of his father. And do you want darker milk chocolate? Because one of the things that I know from just pulling open records is that almost no one in the school has a copy of your child's IEP that provides them an educational product if they don't have a goal in that area. And we give them the parts of the IEP, or even more worse, at a glance, snapshot. So then what was the point of us writing a whole IEP when you're getting a snapshot or at a glance? Do you see that in your districts?
They actually have a one pager. They'll convert the IEP into a one pager and send it to the teachers. But I think, honestly, what I find more frightening is not even the teachers, but I mean, administrators change constantly. I got to imagine it's everywhere. So, and whatever they call them, like in our one district, there's area coordinators and then directors, et cetera. So this area coordinator is over a bunch of teachers, and they come in one year and they, at best, they read the current IEP. No one goes back and reads 3 years back, 4 years back, 5 years back. And, they'll admit that when I get them on the stand, and this kid has had the same goal for 5 years. And I'll be like, did you see? This kid had the same goal for 5 years. And they'll be like, well, I'm focused on this year. And I'm like, just say it. You didn't read anything else. Like, you didn't know that it was the same goal for 5 years. So it's not enough that they even read the current IEP. Did they read the one from the year before and the year before? Did they read the last evaluation that has all that information? So that evaluation data is huge, what it'll tell you about your kid, especially if it's good. We're presuming a good evaluation that has, language and occupational therapy and speech and all the other pieces. That tells you a lot about how your kid can and can't communicate. And teachers often never see those.
Right. One thing that I always say is that we have this unholy alliance with school districts. And the worst thing a parent can say to me is, Karen, I just want you to know I have a really good relationship with the school district. And I invented blunt. I said, you don't. You just happen to live there. And when you graduate and leave, nobody's ever going to call you. I had a client who became volunteer of the year in the state of Texas. I didn't know that was a thing. She's probably spelled more burning plastic laminating because she thought that helped her child get a good IEP. And so what I do know is people that are doing it good are doing it good. And the people that aren't should be hit over the head with a pool noodle. And but I do believe what you said, that when we're in there and we're doing good stuff, it permeates, right? They might not see it right then, but we're providing them that documentation. What would you say to parents who have a child with a disability and they're not finding gains in their child's IEP?
I mean, always ask for a new evaluation. Like, you always want the most updated data. I routinely see, especially in autism, I think it's particularly prevalent there, where a kid comes in kindergarten, goes from that young child developmental delay to autism diagnosis in kindergarten, and they're never tested again.
Yeah.
Like, you're in high school and they were never tested again. And sometimes that kindergarten evaluation didn't even include an IQ or anything else. And every 3-year evaluation, the team comes to the parent and says, still autism, like no need to test, still autism. So getting current data, and the number of parents that don't understand their right to an independent educational evaluation is shocking to me to some extent. I mean, it's in the procedural safeguards, which we both know nobody reads. And even if you did read, it's hard to figure out. But in any other profession, we would want a second opinion. And the IDEA law allows parents to have a free second opinion after any testing. So I always encourage parents to do that. Make sure you're using a good evaluator. Like, some of them are just retired school psychs that still write the same kind of crappy evaluation that they wrote when they were in the school. You want somebody who's going to do a full neuropsych assessment and get that data, because without the data, you're not going anywhere. I, as an attorney, can't help you say that there's no progress. The school will continue to say there is progress. You need the hard data from those kind of neuropsych assessments. That's usually the first thing I tell parents is, what data do you have, and let's get updated data.
Absolutely. It's one of the first things I always do is do comprehensive testing. And even when I'm sitting there, I am shocked, but not, I'm always surprised, but not shocked. That they say, well, we have to, if we don't suspect it, we're not going to test. Where is that written down? That's what we do here. We have to suspect it. I said, good news, you don't. And so kind of talk about when, like, even at meetings, that we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Why do you want the testing? We have to know why. So what would you say to parents that are, they're out there doing it on their own and the school says we have to know why, or we have to suspect the disability?
I mean, there has to be a suspicion of disability. That is the case law, but suspicion is not a proven fact. Suspicion is not, you already came with a diagnosis. Suspicion may be their crappy reading screen that your kid's scoring in, the 12th percentile. It may be that his oral reading fluency norms is, substantially below. If they're using crappy fontness and Pinnell letters, leveled letters, and your kid's still at a B in 3rd grade, well, that's a suspicion. If they're still struggling to count. So what I tell my parents to do, and there's got to be something similar in Texas and most other states. In Missouri, there are Missouri learning standards that are posted on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And you can pull it down for each grade, and then like English, language arts, math, whatever. And I say, okay, pull that up. And there's hundreds of things that are expected of, a kid at the end of 1st grade. I go, pick out the ones your kid can't do. Now you've got a suspicion of disability. These are state expectations. Right. And so that's a concrete thing. You can go back to the school and say, hey, my kid can't actually add 2-digit numbers. My kid can't, spell these words, whatever. So I look at their own metrics and find where the kid falls short and say, there's your suspicion.
Right. And so most people at schools will tell me that they have to have the name. No, you don't have to have the name. I always talk about the characteristics. In fact, don't say the name because then you'll pigeonhole them, right? If you say autism, then I want them to do great thing about evaluations, they identify or eliminate. We want both. And so for me, that's the biggest tragedy is all these parents that were turned away. And one of two things happen, right? Either they just go away or they make their kid go to tutoring for 2 hours every night after school. So this kids getting tutored and tutored and tutored in elementary school outside of school, that would be a suspicion, correct?
I mean, I think so. And sometimes those tutors will give you an evaluation, whatever they're using.
Right.
So whether it's, the Barton reading system that somebody is tutoring, Barton has like a pre-assessment and they have levels. And if you're showing that your kid can't do CVC words in third grade, well, there's your suspicion. So I don't know that it's just tutoring itself that gives a suspicion, but that tutor can then give you information that, your kid's reading on a first grade level in third grade, et cetera. So use the tutor's information. I mean, the problem that a lot of parents face is if I tutor, I may make it just good enough to never get help. If I don't tutor, how the hell long is it going to be before they get help? So,
Right.
That's a conundrum that is a difficult thing as a parent. And I mean, it's one of the things that I did when they denied my second dyslexic in kindergarten. Apparently you can't have dyslexia in kindergarten. Didn't know
Oh,
that.
no.
But yeah, you cannot. You cannot have dyslexia in kindergarten despite all the testing and data. So between kindergarten and first grade, I just stopped all tutoring over the summer. So he came back at first grade reading at an early kindergarten level. And now they're like, oh. And I'm like, huh. I told you I was tutoring him through kindergarten. I told you I was taking him and getting all this stuff. I trained in the Wilson program myself and was doing it at home. So you're almost making it harder to get your kid identified if you're paying for the tutoring. So, I mean, what I tell parents, I'm like, if you're going to tutor, assume that you're doing it in the long haul and you're the only one that's ever going to help your kid. Otherwise, you need to stop tutoring and make the school do their job because you can't do both.
Yeah, I always say you're skewing the data. And if you do that, they're going to take full credit for his progress, right?
Yes.
So, so many good things happening in special ed and things that need to be identified. Tell us how people would get a hold of you if they need your services in Nebraska or Missouri or anywhere on the globe.
Well, I'm mostly in hiding because, like I said, I don't really have room for more. I only take cases right now in Missouri. I am licensed in Nebraska. Dragan Law Firm, you can Google it and find me. But the Litigating Literacy podcast, I think, is probably what you saw that I've been doing. So I switched the Lindbergh Leaders in Literacy page to Litigating Literacy, and I'm posting stuff quite, pretty regularly on there. So, you can get a hold of me that way, but I'm full. So, yeah. I got to imagine it's the same for you. There's just so few people doing this work.
Yes.
And with regard to, I send a ton of people to advocates. Let me say that first. Like they come to me and I'm like, man, I think an advocate can handle that. And maybe we talk a minute about kind of the difference of when you go to an attorney, because generally if you're coming to me, you want something that costs money. You want the private placement, you want the private tutoring, you want the actual eligibility that they won't give you. You want your kid unsuspended. You want all of the disciplinary things. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense for someone to come to an attorney so that I can help the school write SMART goals.
Right.
So, I don't know if you have a formula or an idea of when you push people from advocacy to attorneys, but I know I push as many people back down to advocates as I can, unless they're trying to seek something that is going to cost the school money.
Right. I mean, I'll go along. I've got a pretty high pain tolerance until about March. I don't have a pain. I call it March madness, April showers of mayhem. I'm not pleasant at all those 90 days. But I'll go a long ways if I feel like we're moving, right? What I don't like is the school dragging out the meeting. They always say it's advocates. It's the school dragging out the meeting. I'm German. I want to get in, get it done, and get out. But if I can't overcome what is a baseline expectation in the law, then they're going to have to consider due process, right? If you're going to live here and Sally's 8 You either want to keep this or you want them to know that they need to respect you and their obligations, duties, and responsibilities for this IEP. I can't fix it for everybody, but I probably have 4 or 5 a year that go to hearing. I wish we didn't. I wish we could just all play nice and just do what's basic. Because, I mean, nobody wins in a hearing. Nobody goes, that Diane and Nick, we love to see them pull up to the school. That Karen, she's awesome, right? And so I think for a lot of parents, when they go to hearing, they're surprised at what the school says about them in the hearing, right? That it's not roses in a basket of puppies. But I think it's a mechanism that we have to use. And I think it's very effective. We have great attorneys serving those families.
And I do think that, like, there's a lot of parents that try and do this themselves, and God love them, God love them. But I think that they're totally taken advantage of. And they don't know what they're walking into. Like, these are painful experiences, even guided by counsel. Right. And sometimes especially guided by counsel, because I know how to get the discovery. I know how to get the internal emails. I know, and so you have these parents who think that, like you said, they're volunteering and they're running the class parties and they're always the one with the, juice boxes, not just the napkins, etc. And so they think that they have garnered some respect. And in reality, there's these internal emails saying things like, man, I hate it when she shows up in my room. I think she's here just to spy on me. And you're just like, really?
Yeah.
And, I've told parents before, they'll tell me, hey, there's this great teacher. She's always on my side. I see her at whatever, book club, church, whatever. We talk and she says all these things. And I say, but when push comes to shove, that teacher has to decide whether they love their job or they love your child more. And I go, your child's not paying their bills. And inevitably, the teacher will love their job more. And then all of a sudden, they didn't have these conversations. They didn't do these things. They didn't take Venmo payments from the parent, for stuff that they were doing, etc. So they're unpleasant. Nobody wants to go to a hearing, but until more people go to hearings, nothing's going to change. I mean, I don't know what your numbers are in Texas, but in Missouri, it is well less than like 0.5% of all. I mean, there's 115,000 IEPs in Missouri, and maybe 10 people file a year.
Yeah, so we 800,000 kiddos here with an IEP. About 600 IEPs due processes are filed. About 25 go to hearing, right? It's a numbers game. One of the things that you said, I think is so important about parents thinking that, we're friends and they like me and I'm their favorite. We were at a hearing one time, and one of the problems is people don't complain. They don't complain on paper. They don't write an email back. This is my recollection of what happened today. And I'll get a client, I'll go, okay, I don't know where you complained. Well, when we were talking in the meeting, but I didn't want to write it down. I felt like that was ugly. No, it's clear. It's clear, right? I remember being in a hearing one time, and we sort of lost the case by this. And she's like, are these the thank you notes that you sent to Miss Smith every 6 weeks about she's the greatest teacher ever for Bailey? And it's like, your goodness is flipped on you. People are just stunned, right? So yeah. But they want to sue us. And so kind of talk a little bit about, if the IEP is a mess and you're going to use one of your dispute resolution mechanisms, then leave it a mess if you're wanting somebody else to make a decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the problems that I have sometimes getting cases from advocates is they'll go in there and they will want to clean everything up. They will want to write the SMART goals. They will want 10 goals in all of the areas of need. And on paper, that looks like a great IEP, but it's in a district that is not going to service it. Right. So if the advocate knows that a district, the literacy stuff is easy. If you know that the district has no literacy program, you're going to get an eclectic hodgepodge of crap by putting your kid in the special ed literacy room. Then why the heck are you writing CVC goals and all this other stuff? Because they're not going to follow it, but it looks good. Right. So, you don't, as coming to an attorney, I want the crappiest IEP that the school wrote. Like, I'm not saying help them write a really bad one. I'm just saying don't fix it. I need a really bad IEP that I can say, look, the present levels don't match the goals. The goals aren't measurable. these goals don't have anything to do with the needs. And in fact, what the hell happened to written expression? Like, this kid can't write a sentence. He can't spell. Why is there no encoding goal? But an advocate who thinks their job is to fix the IEP actually can ruin the long-term prospect of litigating the case. Because then I got to wait for that IEP to fail before I can do anything about it, because it looks good on paper.
Right. That's so good. It's not funny, but it's like, yeah, where did you get this goal? I love when they have an eligibility, but they don't need a goal or services. I said, well, then you should DNQ him. Miss Cunningham, we're not going to do that. Okay. So we test kids who may be in need of special education related services. He doesn't need that. He has 3 reading goals and he has autism and a speech impairment. Okay. I mean, make it make sense. If we actually played the recordings of IEP meetings, people wouldn't believe us. They would really think it's made up. I'm like, where are the grown-ups? Am I the grown-up? So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being on. Thank you so much for your social media. It's so good. It is so good that you just say the truth and serve families. So we hope you'll come back.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I will say I get much enjoyment out of watching yours and some of your short clips. And I do just laugh with some of the things, because it's like people don't really understand how ridiculous some of the things that are said. And I get that all the time, like, oh, this is just one school district. I'm like, no, it is not. It is most school districts. And that really upsets people.
Yeah, I love when school districts like, I think that video was about me. Oh, no, it's the same meeting. Kodiak Islands, Miami-Dade. It's the same meeting.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you.
It was great talking to you.
All right, dear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change, we're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.